Hi and welcome back to BookTube with Amy. This is going to be my most recent weekly wrap up and my June stats. So I've got two books to talk to you about that I read this past week. One of them excellent, one of them like the worst book in the world. So quite polar opposites. Let's start on a positive note. I read These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling, and this is the first in a duology. I do have the second one on my shelf that I am currently reading because I just loved this first one so much. It was fantastic. This is about our main character Hannah, and she is a witch, not unlike the teenage variety, and her family is in a local coven. Her granny is like the high priestess of this local coven, and in this world you get three types of witches. You get elemental witches, which Hannah is, so she can control all the elements, you know, air, fire, water, earth. And then you get caster witches, and they are just really good at casting spells and potions, etc. And then you get blood witches who deal with blood magic, and they can control you if they gain access to any of your blood. So Hannah and her ex are in the same coven. They got into a wee bit of shenanigans off page, and then somebody starts trying to cause some trouble for their coven, and they think it is linked to the teenage shenanigans that they had got up to. So they're a wee bit panicky about it, a wee bit annoyed, and feel like her gran isn't really taking her very seriously, so she decides that her and her ex need to team up to like get to the bottom of actually what's going on, because they are the only people who can talk about it openly and honestly with each other. We then have her best friend Gemma, who is just a human who doesn't know that she is a witch, and her trying to get involved to help solve this mystery. And then things are a wee bit more complicated when Hannah forms a crush on our new girl Morgan, who is just adorable, and they start dating, which complicates things with her ex, and it's very like teenage angst and it was exactly what I needed. The characters are so well developed that like the angst is warranted and it makes sense, and it wasn't like, oh, I don't really want to read that, because normally like teenage angsty romances I'm like put that down immediately. But the characters in here were absolutely superb. This was so queer, it was great. Like bisexual rep in here of a daughter and her dad who was also bisexual, which was excellent. So we had like talk about that and how it was easy for her to come out because her dad was bisexual also, and so like he totally understood. You know, our main character Hannah, she's a lesbian, and we have her relationship with her ex-girlfriend, and then also Morgan, who's bisexual. There's just, it's excellent, really excellent. I thoroughly loved this. It was such a fun time, and had I the time I could have actually just sat and read this in one entire sitting because it was truly fantastic. The magic was so interesting and unique as well, because you have the different factions of the witches, so learning like how their different magic could be played out in situations was so interesting. The mystery kept me really engaged, and you know how I feel about mysteries. I am always like, yes, love a thriller, because I get quite frustrated just wanting to know what was happening, but I was never frustrated with this because the pace moves so quickly and you feel like you're finding out so much, and the characters are excellent, so you're really just happy to have some time with these characters as well, dealing with some of their personal issues, or you know, just hanging out with them like you were hanging out with your friends, and it didn't feel like the plot was stalling at any point. This was a 5-star read for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and could be one of the best YA fantasy books I've picked up this year, to be completely and utterly honest. I devoured it. I loved every single character in here, like even when characters were being really annoying and you were like, why are you making these choices, like why are you acting like this, I still really loved them. And again, normally I would find that really annoying, but they were just so complex in the way that they were written, and I could really empathise with them, and so then I didn't really find it quite as annoying. I just wanted to come in and be their mum and fix everything for them. Guess I'm maternal now for book characters who are teenagers, but alright. It was excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would highly recommend. Then the next book. the one I absolutely hated was The Voids by Ryan O'Connor. So Ryan O'Connor is a Scottish author from Glasgow. I picked this one up in Waterstones a few times and I really fancied it, but didn't pick it up. And then when we were on holiday in Oban last year, I believe, this was on sale in the wee Waterstones in Oban, so I picked it up for myself and I was really excited to get it. It's about our main character whose name we never know, and he is living in a tenement in Glasgow, and the tenement is, you know, set to be destroyed, so everybody who has been living in that tenement has been like paid off to move away basically, but he is refusing to move. And so it's basically, well, it was supposed to be about him and I guess the last remaining few people in this tenement. And I didn't go into this book thinking it was going to be all sunshine and flowers, because obviously, like, they're living in a tenement that's going to get destroyed. They can't be living in the best conditions, and there's obviously a reason why they are staying there. So I thought that it might be quite emotional. You know, we might be talking about families who are struggling, who are in poverty, you know, maybe people who are homeless, who are maybe like just dossing in there even though they shouldn't be, that type of thing. And then like our main character might be getting to know these people and their stories or whatever. I thought like this was maybe going to be a community piece, and it wasn't. What it turned out to be was just our main character's entire life story of misery, I guess, and addiction. So it jumps backwards and forwards in time, where we basically just learn all this stuff about him, and sort of you deal with him throughout his life, from when he's younger to like present day, like, and we just sort of get to know all these random amalgamations of stories about him that I felt like never really fleshed or fused together to make any real point, to be honest. I had quite a few issues with this book. Quite a few issues with this book. So my first issue is just the portrayal of addiction in here. I didn't feel like that was done well at all, and that is something that really bugs me, and I've spoken about it a lot on the channel. But I feel like when authors are writing characters with addiction, like, they have a real responsibility, and I feel like Ryan O'Connor didn't live up to that responsibility whatsoever. I'm going to put that down because I'm going to get very ranty, and we know I use my hands when I get ranty. So our main character is just like the worst, and I get it. You know, people who are on drugs, people who do horrible things for their next fix, maybe aren't likeable characters at all times, and I get that. But like, he wasn't a likeable character at any point. Like, even when he was sober, he had no ounce of self-reflection or development, like, or desire to change or anything like that at all. He was just happy being a wee junkie, doing whatever he needed to like get to his next fix, no giving a fuck like what life events he missed, what pals he had or hadn't, just wasn't bothered his hoop, just wanted drugs and nothing else. And while I completely understand that mentality, and obviously like 9 times out of 10 that is the mentality of an addict, I feel like you should never just have a drug addict in your story so that you can write mental stuff. Like, you know, he was just writing, he was doing this and that and this and that, and just like, it was like ramping up, but not really going anywhere. It's like he just wanted to write a mental story about a guy in a drugs binge, and so that's what he did. But like, that's not what a life of addiction is, and I just feel like he didn't portray it well at all, and it really got my goat, especially because he's a Scottish author. And so I just feel like Scotland is rife with drugs, and it's so commonplace here. I spoke about this a lot on the channel as well, with Ange, when we reviewed both the Young Team and when we reviewed Young Mungo and Shuggy Bain, because they all touch on drug use and just how casual it is in Scotland. And it's so commonplace here that I feel like authors, especially Scottish authors, who are talking about addicts in their book have a real responsibility to get it right, and he just didn't. Like, he didn't at all. There was no a moment in here where I felt any ounce of compassion or pity for this guy. You know, it didn't make me think, alright, well, I could understand why somebody would maybe struggle with drugs, like, or I could, like, empathise with somebody. I would maybe come to the realisation that drug addiction is a real illness, because that's another thing that does my head in as well, when people didn't class it as a proper illness because it's self-inflicted apparently. Like, well, it fucking is. But anyway, that's another rant for another time. There was just nothing. It just made it seem like it was the best thing since sliced bread to be absolutely out your tits on pills and to be doing all this mental shit. And it's no, like, it really fucking isn't. And so I detested that element of this book, which meant I never ever connected to our main character at all. And I didn't understand why it jumped forwards and backwards in time so often as it did, because it added absolutely nothing to the story. If we were going back in time and maybe getting all of this mental stuff happening for his youth, where he was on, like, the drugs and doing XYZ, and then we were jumping forward to time and he had like an ounce of doubt or an ounce of self-reflection, like, we were seeing that he was a different person now, I could have understood that. But there was nothing, no character growth, no development. Like, he was still just doing the same stuff now. So I didn't understand why we were going backwards and forwards in time. Like, we could have started at point A, got to point B in a linear timeline and still exactly had the same experience. And it wasn't that it was difficult to follow at points or anything like that. It was easy to follow. It's not written complicated, but it just added nothing. So I would query that choice, to be honest, stylistically. And then there were points in this book that I felt were actually pretty racist, and they just really got my back up. So we live in Glasgow. This book is set in Glasgow for a Glasgow author. You know, we have a multicultural community in Glasgow. So accurately, I would say there are a lot of refugees portrayed in this book, or just people who aren't Scottish, and I think that is accurate. However, the way that Ryan O'Connor decided to write these characters really pissed me off. So the first time that we ever meet a character, it turns out to be one of our main characters, his neighbours, and he's a refugee who's living there with his family. When he's writing that character's dialogue, he almost has the character misspeaking and having, like, words out of order. And, like, I just didn't feel like there was a need for that, because these are just having a conversation. Like, it wasn't adding anything to this person's character, so why would you do it? The only reason you would do that is to, like, emphasise the fact that they are foreign. I just didn't really like that. And then it happened literally every single time there was anybody on the page who wasn't white and Scottish, and I just felt like that was fucking shite. Like, you didn't need to do that every single time. It's not like we are getting any length of time with these characters. We are, like, maybe we'd find out something that would make sense for them in the dialogue, and it wasn't even like he was using the opportunity to correct them or anything like that. Like, so I just didn't really know what the point of it was, other than to emphasise this is a foreign person. Where does the need to do that in your book? Like, build a fucking character. Like, tell me, you know, don't have them mispronounce words so that, like, I get the fact that they are nae fae here. That was shit, and I'm not being funny, but there's probably refugees and immigrants in Glasgow who can speak a hell of a lot better English than me, let me tell you. So I felt like that was just quite shite, and I didn't really understand why, again, he made that choice to do that. And then there was one scene in here that got me really raging, and I actually had to put the book down, and I was seriously considering DNFing this book. And in hindsight, having finished it, I wish I really fucking did, but I felt like maybe we could be building to something, and, like, the ending was going to pack a punch or whatever. It didn't. Spoilers. But there's a scene in here where him, his best pal, whose name I forget, because everybody was pretty forgettable in here, we were with them for fleeting minutes, so you didn't get attached to fucking anybody. Him, his best pal, and their, like, witchy pal, go to a Chinese restaurant. But before they go to the Chinese restaurant, they all get absolutely smashed out their tits on random pills. So they're at this restaurant, all three of them, high out their tree, and so like the waiter comes round, they order their food, they forget that they've ordered it, they order it again, forget that they've order it again. So by the time the food comes, they've got like 4 or 5 times what they had actually originally meant to order. And like their witch pal comes to a wee bit first, and she starts freaking out, and she's like, Ken, what the fuck is this, all this food, blah blah blah, and she's stressing about how like they're going to pay for it and how they're going to eat it, and like she just gets the feed a bit, so she buggers off. So it just leaves the 2 guys in the restaurant, and then the like owner of the restaurant, who they seem to be pretty familiar with, they talk about how the fact that they come here a lot, they refer to him like by his first name, so pretty familiar, I'd say. And he's just asking them like, are you alright, is everything fine, because they've ordered obviously this huge massive quantity of food, and they both start having a go at him, and they're like, we've no ordered this, da da da, and he was like, well, like you have, like this is what's happened. And so your main character's like, right, well, fair enough then, it is what it is, we'll eat what we can, and then like we'll just need to pay for the rest or whatever. But his pal like starts absolutely biffing out and is like stoning on the table, shouting in the guy's face, I'm no fucking paying for this, blah blah blah, starts like racially abusing him and like doing stupid wee Chinese voice. And like, can I say, I did some of this on audio, and like the audio narrator was doing like the Chinese voice and that, like, that's not acceptable. Like, I know obviously that audiobook narrators do different voices for different characters and stuff like that, and while I completely and utterly appreciate that, I just don't feel like you should be doing different accents. I feel like that's heavily disrespectful, especially in a scene where it's a Scottish person taking the piss out of a Chinese person's accent, and the audiobook narrator for this was Scottish, so that's exactly what was happening on the audiobook. And I just felt like that, like, was there a need for that? So I really didn't enjoy that at all, and I'm unclear if that was like the audiobook narrator's choice, or obviously whether the author had instructed for the audiobook to be read like that. I didn't really know how that works. I have never been an audiobook narrator, but I think that that's shite, and if I was an audiobook narrator and an author approached me and they wanted me to take the piss out of somebody's accent, I would be like, hell no. But anyway, I digress. I just didn't feel like there was a need for that scene at all. And like, our main character is just like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, like, he's just on drugs, you know, he probably didn't mean to be racist, I'm really sorry, blah blah blah. And like, the guy who owns the restaurant ends up just putting them out and telling them to get to fuck, basically, and rightly so. But like, what was the point in that scene? Because it didn't delve far enough. It's not like your main character then was like, holy shit, like, look what the drugs did to him, it made him a complete and utter racist bam, I didn't want that to be me, so I'm going to get clean. Nor did it promote a conversation between him and his pal, where he was like, subconsciously, you must be quite racist somewhere, like, because it came out when you got steaming. There wasn't any of that, so what was the point? Genuinely. And I really hate when an author writes a book and I feel like they have just either made certain character choices or certain plot choices just to push out their own views and opinions on certain things. Like, it's no big, it's no clever. So what was the point of this? Did Ryan O'Connor just want to abuse a Chinese guy in a restaurant once and thought, oh, here's an idea, da 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 da, wee quick scene about it to get it out my system? Like, because there was no point to the story, like, it added no value. I really didn't like it. I've seen loads of people praising this book, and I genuinely am not seeing what they're seeing. Like, I really am not. I wish I DNF'd this. It will be immediately unhauled. I'm not keeping this shite on my shelf. Doesn't deserve the space, frankly. But I just don't get it. Like, people were comparing this to Douglas Stewart. Like, oh, it's so bleak, it's so beautiful, blah blah blah, very reminiscent of Douglas Stewart. Is it? Fuck. This guy couldn't write a fucking character to save himself. Like, it absolutely was not Douglas Stewart. Like, and I'm so annoyed that it was a Scottish author, because I like to be a channel that really champions Scottish authors and bigs them up and promotes their work, and I just can't. Like, I just can't. I will never pick up another book that Ryan O'Connor writes. This was his debut, like, and I will never ever pick up anything he ever writes again. It was honestly abysmal, really, really bad, really poor. I don't know what I was meant to get out of it. I really don't. It wasn't enjoyable. I didn't care about the characters enough to be involved in any of the misery or anguish that was happening to them. I like a miserable book. Like, I really don't mind that. It doesn't need to have a happy ending. You know, as long as I care about the character enough that I care about their journey that the author's taking me on, then it's fine, it's a good time. Like, I'll happily sit and greet my eyes out of an evening, no bother. But this didn't even do that. So, I just don't know what it was trying to achieve. I rated this a 1 star in the end, and if I could rate it no stars I would, but I rated it a 1 star because I had to rate it something. But it was bitterly disappointing, very questionable I'd say in terms of the representation of an addict and the blatant racism that is included in the book. Absolutely disgusting, don't ever pick it up. And now we can jump over to the stats. So this is my breakdown for June. So I read 7 books by female authors, which made up 50% of my reading. I read 6 books by male authors, which made up 43% of my reading. And then 1 book by a non-binary author, which made up 7% of my reading. In terms of my ethnicity split, I read predominantly white authors in June. So I read 9 books by white authors, which makes up 64%. I read 4 books by BAME authors, which makes up 29% of my reading. And then I read 1 lonely wee terrible book by a Scottish author, which made up 7% of my reading. My queer split was making merry an effort to pick up queer books this month, specifically with it being Pride, and our book club pick for the month of June was a queer book also. So I read 9 queer books, which makes up 64% of my reading, and 5 books that were not queer, which made up 36% of my reading. So it'll be interesting to see how my ratings go this month, because I tend to predominantly rate queer books a bit higher in terms of star rating. So interesting to see where that sits. In terms of what I was reading, quite a varied month for me. I read 3 graphic novels, I read 3 literary fiction, which I think is like the most literary fiction I've ever read in a single month all year. I've read 3 YA fantasy, 2 fantasy, a contemporary romance, a cosy mystery, and a middle grade. Quite a varied range of genres there. In terms of a series versus standalone split, it's 50-50 for the first time ever. So 7 books were standalones and 7 books were part of a series. My format in my books, so how I was reading this month, I read 6 books mixed media, so that's partly doing the physical, partly doing them on audio. I read 3 books physically, so that was 21% of my reading, and then I did 5 books solely on audio, which made up 36% of my reading, and everything that I read in June was traditionally published. That's purely because I'm saving all my indie books now for Indie August. I plan to dedicate an entire month to just reading indie, other than my Aurora Teagarden book that I'll need to read, and potentially a Fiction Addiction book club. But I'd like to try and make that indie for August, so we will see. So my ratings, the white authors that I read from, I rated 4.56. The BAME authors I read from, I rated 2.5. That's Taheri Mafi bringing the side down, because I absolutely detested the end of the Shatter Me series. And then Scottish authors, I rated 2. So Scottish is the lowest rated for the first time, I think, in like the history of my channel. But that book, I'm not going to start, but it was absolutely dreadful. My male authors rated 4 stars. My female authors rated 3.71. And my non-binary authors rated 3. My queer books came in at 4.11 stars, and my non-queer books came in at 3.2 stars. My contemporary romances were 5, my cosy mysteries were a 5, graphic novels were 4.33, fantasy was a 4, middle grade a 4, literary fiction was 3.67, and my YA fantasy, again at the lowest, was 2.33. And again, that'll be Taheri Mafi, because I actually read some excellent YA fantasy this month, but aye, she's just bringing the team down. Standalones, I actually rated standalones higher than my series for the first time ever. So they came in at 3.86 and my series came in at 3.71. Then everything was traditionally published this month, so my overall rating was 3.79. I did not have a single DNF this month, which is surprising because I do love a DNF. And then in terms of my page count, so this month I read 5,188 pages, which brings my average page count to about 370 pages per book, which isn't too bad at all. And I actually read more than I did last month, by just shy of about 2,000 pages. I think that's just because I was reading some chunkier books this month. So as you'll see from my top 10 of all time, I read Wolfsong this month, and that came in at 494 pages. I read The Sorceress by Michael Scott. That came in at 502 pages. And then I read Arthur and Teddy Are Coming Out, which came in at 661 pages. So just some bigger books rather than actually reading more than I normally would have, but I'm really happy with that. I was trying to fit in as many queer authors and queer books as I could, and I'm really chuffed with where I am sitting. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying everything that you're reading at the moment. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.